If you told me that the middle chapter of 28 Years Later trilogy would hinge on Ralph Fiennes performing a satanic drag show to cure a zombie of his anger issues, I would have asked you to share whatever controlled substance you were on. But here we are. The final 10 seconds of The Bone Temple don't just bridge the gap of the original Danny Boyle classic, they fundamentally rewrite the biology of the rage virus. 28 years later, The Bone Temple is essentially a Clockwork Orange dropped into the middle of a zombie apocalypse, minus the milk bars with double the ultraviolence. It is a fever dream that trades the structured tension of the previous film for something feral, grounded, and weirdly tender. It doesn't quite hit the emotional highs of its predecessor, and it definitely suffers from the middle child syndrome in a trilogy, but watching Fiennes build a bromance with a roided out infected is cinema I didn't know I needed. We need to talk about the mind cure, the absolute nihilism of the Jimmy cult, and why this movie suggests that empathy is a more dangerous weapon than a machete. The film picks up with Spike, who has apparently decided if you can't beat him, join the weirdest cult in Britain. He's embedded with the Jimmies, a group of survivors who feel less like a scavenger party and more like a theatrical troupe of sociopaths. Leading the circus is Sir Lord Jimmy Crystal. If the name didn't tip you off, the guy has illusions of grandeur that would make a Bond villain blush. He's a charismatic Satanist, which provides a fascinating, stark contrast to what we see later with Dr. Kelson. The movie wastes no time establishing the stakes here. To become a finger in Jimmy's inner circle, Spike has to kill another Jimmy. It's a frat hazing ritual, but instead of paddling, it's murder. This establishes the film's core aesthetic immediately. It's grimy, and it really leans into the Kubrickian Clockwork Orange vibe where the violence is almost performative. Dr. Kelson, played by Ray Fiennes, is maintaining the Bone Temple. Fiennes is doing incredible work here, grounding a premise that could have easily flown off the rails. Kelson is an atheist, a man of science, essentially running a memorial service for a world that stopped listening. He spends his days listening to Radiohead and fighting off a local alpha infected he calls Sampson. Now, usually in these movies, an alpha infected is just a boss battle. Here, he's a roommate who doesn't pay rent and tries to eat you. Kelson uses a blowgun with a morphine Xyzin cocktail to sedate him. It's a routine. Kelson isn't killing the monster, he's managing him. This dynamic is the heartbeat of the film. And we have to stop to look at the lore logic here because this is the biggest swing the movie takes. Kelson notices that Sampson is addicted to the morphine. He's coming back not to kill, but to get high. When Sampson is drugged, he becomes lucid. This changes everything we know about the rage virus. For 28 years, real time and movie time, we've operated on the assumption that the virus burns the mind away. It's a hardware wipe. But Kelson's theory posits that the person is still there, trapped under a layer of chemically induced psychosis. The virus is a cloud, not a lobotomy. By treating Sampson with antipsychotics and depressants, Kelson isn't fighting a virus, he's treating a mental illness. It recontextualizes every screaming infected we've seen for 3 decades. They aren't dead, they're locked in. It's horrifyingly tragic and adds a layer of the Flowers of Algernon to the zombie genre. While Kelson is conducting the world's most dangerous therapy session, the Jimmies are out proving why humanity might not be worth saving. They raid a farm occupied by survivors, including a couple, Tom and Kathy. This sequence is rough. The Jimmies round everyone up to skin them as a sacrifice to Satan. It's brutality for brutality's sake, emphasizing the Droog comparison. They aren't doing this for resources, they're doing it for the vibes. This sets up the film's central thematic conflict. On one side, you have Jimmy Crystal, who believes he's harvesting souls for his father, Satan, through torture. On the other side, you have Dr. Kelson, an atheist who is actually restoring souls to empty vessels through empathy and science. It is beautiful poetry written in blood. Kelson treats the monsters with more humanity than Jimmy treats actual humans. Spike, to his credit, is vomiting in disgust outside the barn, which is the only relatable reaction. He's saved by Jimmy Inc., or Kelly, who seems to be the only cultist realizing that maybe skinning people isn't a sustainable long-term governance strategy. Back at the temple, the cure is working. Sampson starts having flashbacks to his childhood. He speaks. It's a breakthrough that validates Kelson's life work, but because this is a horror movie, we know this tender progress is about to collide with the Jimmy's satanic roadshow. The collision course is set. Jimmy Crystal's morale is low after a botched raid where a pregnant woman with a hook, Kathy, decimated his ranks. He needs to win to keep the cult in line. Ink tells him about the Bone Temple. It's the worst possible advice at the worst possible time. Jimmy confronts Kelson and demands a show. He wants Kelson to play Satan, Old Nick, to scare the cult back into submission. This leads us toward the climax, and if you thought the farm raid was intense, you're not prepared for the Iron Maiden sequence. But before we get to the pyrotechnics, we have to talk about how a simple lip sync performance becomes a battle for the soul of the franchise. Kelson, under threat of death, has to perform for the cult. But Kelson, being the smartest guy in the room, doesn't just put on a show, he weaponizes the theater. He drugs the Jimmies with a hallucinogenic cocktail and then launches into a pyrotechnic lip sync performance of Iron Maiden's The Number of the Beast. It is absurd, it is high camp, and it is terrifying. The movie leans fully into the rock and roll horror aesthetic here. Kelson isn't just distracting him, he is overloading their senses, trying to break the trance of Jimmy's cult by becoming a bigger, louder, scarier monster than Jimmy himself. But the performance is a Trojan horse. Kelson realizes Spike is embedded in the group and attempts to turn the fingers against Jimmy, urging them to crucify the false prophet. It almost works, but almost is usually where characters die in this franchise. Jimmy fatally stabs Kelson. It's a gut punch because we spent the last hour watching this man teach a zombie to love again. Chaos erupts. Ink, who is revealed to be Kelly, goes full John Wick on the remaining cultist. In the confusion, Spike stabs Jimmy, and Ink finishes the job by impaling Jimmy on an inverted cross. The imagery here is not subtle. Jimmy, who spent the whole movie demanding sacrifices for his father, Satan, dies on his own symbol, hallucinating that Sampson, the very infected he despised, is the devil coming to collect him. Meanwhile, Sampson carries Kelson's body away. It's a literal memento mori. Remember, you must die. Jimmy dies in delusion. Kelson dies in the arms of his creation, having successfully restored humanity to a monster. And we need to break down this ending because it does three massive things for the lore. First, the mind cure is confirmed. Sampson is cured. He kills the whore to protect the innocent, proving that the rage virus is a chemical imbalance, a clouding of the mind rather than a deletion of the soul. This recontextualizes the entire franchise from a survival horror to a tragedy about mental illness on a global scale. Second, the Cillian Murphy reveal. We jump forward in time to find Jim, homeschooling his daughter Sam. When he sees Kelly and Spike fleeing infected, he doesn't hide, he rushes to help. This connects the cynicism of the Bone Temple back to the optimism of 28 Days Later. Jim learned that you don't survive by hiding, you survive by offering a hand. It sets the stage for the third film to be a war between the cured and the infected, with Jim likely leading the charge. So what are we actually looking at here? On the surface, it's a cult slasher, but dig a little deeper and the Bone Temple is a dissertation on the weaponization of empathy. The film presents two worldviews. You have the Jimmies, nihilistic, sadistic, viewing humans as meat and the infected as background noise. They represent the absolute breakdown of social contracts. They are the droogs, violence for the sake of entertainment. Then you have Kelson. His worldview is atheistic, but deeply spiritual in his practice. He believes that even the empty vessels of the infected deserve patience. The film argues that Kelson's empathy is actually more dangerous to the status quo than Jimmy's violence. Jimmy just killed people, Kelson changed them. By curing Sampson, Kelson threatened the binary world of us versus them that the apocalypse relies on. There is a beautiful, jagged poetry in the fact that the Satanist cult leader destroys bodies to feed a delusion, while the atheist doctor repairs minds to restore reality. It's a messy, imperfect movie, but it respects the vibes of the universe while completely dismantling the rules we thought we knew. I respect the hell out of this movie. The Bone Temple drops the structured survival horror of the first film for a feral Clockwork Orange-style character study that feels more like a indie drama with a budget than a blockbuster. Ray Fiennes carries the entire production on his back, turning a potentially silly subplot about zombie therapy into the emotional anchor of the entire trilogy. Is it perfect? No, the plot is looser than Jimmy's morals. And there are dangling threads like Spike's dad, the baby that came for the infected woman. They are not even touched upon in this movie. But it takes a swing. It dares to ask, what if we could fix them instead of just shooting them? For the audacity of the mind cure and the sheer spectacle of the Iron Maiden climax, I'm giving The Bone Temple 4 out of 5 stars. It's not the sequel you expected, but it's the bridge this trilogy needed. But I turn it to you. What did you think of The Bone Temple? Did you like it better than the previous movie? And what are your theories about the third movie? Let me know down in the comments below. If you like this video, hit that like button and consider subscribing and joining our YouTube memberships, or even share it with a friend. And I'll see you in the next one.